What if the deepest and most guarded secrets of Christendom don't lie beneath the majestic vaults of Roman cathedrals or in the carefully locked archives of Paris, but are hidden beneath the shifting tides of a humble, barely noticeable island, lost in the boundless expanse of the sea? It's a small patch of land, inconspicuous to a casual glance, yet laden with centuries of rumors, conjectures, and reverent whispers, capable of redefining our understanding of history. Could this be Oak Island, nestled off the picturesque coast of Nova Scotia, the final refuge for relics once protected by the most powerful and subsequently persecuted order of medieval Europe, the legendary Knights Templar? Imagine for a moment, as the waves carry you towards its mysterious shores, where an unspoken truth lurks behind every rustle of the wind. Allow yourself to be transported to this shore, where the salty sea air caresses your skin, and the piercing cries of gulls echo overhead, like the voices of restless spirits guarding ancient secrets. The waters of Mahone Bay, surrounding the island, shimmer with an unnatural, almost unsettling stillness, as if they themselves are silent custodians of something untold. Somewhere beneath this mirrored surface, deep within the soil of this outwardly unremarkable island, a revelation might lie hidden, possessing the potential to completely rewrite historical chronicles and alter our perception of the past. This captivating question has plagued treasure hunters and researchers for over 2 centuries. What exactly is concealed within the depths of Oak Island? Is it untold riches, gold, jewels, and crowns capable of tempting even the most powerful monarchs? Or is it something far more enigmatic, something that transcends material value and poses a much greater danger to established dogmas? Some whisper of a hidden library containing forbidden gospels, texts that could challenge official church doctrine. Others point to relics supposedly plundered from Jerusalem, among which might be the Holy Grail itself, or even the mystical Ark of the Covenant, capable of bestowing divine power. There are also those convinced that the truth is even more unusual. Perhaps it's not so much an object as it is knowledge, proof of an ancient bloodline, carefully preserved through the ages, protected by the Templars, and buried in absolute silence, far from prying eyes and curious minds. Before we delve deeper into these fascinating conjectures, let's take a brief pause. If you find this investigation intriguing, please subscribe to the channel and give it a like. It truly helps our journey of uncovering mysteries. We'd also be interested to know where you're following this story from, so feel free to leave a comment. And remember, the most important conclusions await us at the end of this video, so watch it all the way through. Links to our other captivating investigations can be found in the description. To fully navigate this path, we must slow our steps and carefully listen to the whispers that permeate the lines of history. We need to trace the subtle, almost invisible threads left by vanished orders and long-forgotten journeys. These threads, like seaweed, drift just below the surface of the historical tide, ready to reveal their secrets. Every clue is fragile, every possibility incredibly tempting, and together they weave a narrative that speaks equally of profound faith and treacherous betrayal, as well as untold riches. The Knights Templar, once the mighty guardians of Christendom, were simultaneously objects of fear and deep reverence. They marched under the banner of the Red Cross, fearlessly defending pilgrims on their perilous journey to Jerusalem, and managed to build a financial empire whose power threatened even kings and popes themselves. However, in the fateful year 1307, the world suddenly turned against them. In a single night, their leaders were seized, their order dissolved, and their alleged sins, heresy, blasphemy, idolatry, were loudly proclaimed to the world to justify their annihilation. But beneath the veil of these accusations and the flames of the pyres lay a deeper and more unsettling suspicion. What if their true crime was not worshipping demons or desecrating holy sites, but protecting something the Church itself could not control, something that could undermine its authority? At the time, the Templars were ruthlessly persecuted. Their numerous ships mysteriously vanished from French harbors. Historical records suggest that entire fleets slipped away into the night, their precious cargo remaining unknown, shrouded in mystery. Where did they go? Some historians speculate their path led to Scotland, where the order still held influence, others to Portugal, where they were able to revive under a new name. But there is a far bolder and more intriguing theory that at least some of these ships headed west, beyond the horizon, to lands only vaguely mentioned on old maps and in the tales of brave sailors. Could it be that they reached the shores of North America more than a century before Christopher Columbus set foot in the New World? And if so, could Oak Island have become their carefully planned vault, their last and most secure refuge from persecution? Consider the peculiar and unique nature of this mystery. When boys first began excavations on the island in 1795, they discovered not haphazardly scattered treasures, but a carefully engineered shaft, what would later be called the money pit. Inside, wooden platforms were found, spaced every 10 feet, clear signs of deliberate human construction, as if someone had been building deep downwards with a specific, well-thought-out purpose. This was no simple burial of gold. It was complex architecture, a defensive system, an engineering feat designed to protect something at all costs. And when water surged through what appeared to be artificial tunnels leading directly from the sea, it seemed almost alive, as if the island itself was resisting intrusion, guarding its ancient secrets. Such incredible ingenuity raises many questions. Who, centuries before modern engineering, could have created floodable tunnels and complex booby-trapped shafts on a remote island? Few possessed such knowledge and technology, and even fewer had such a powerful motive. And this is why the whispers returned to the Templars. Skilled in construction, deeply immersed in secrets, and burdened with relics too dangerous to reveal, they could well have hidden their treasures here, beyond the reach of the crown or the all-seeing eye of the Church, ensuring their absolute safety. But what treasures exactly? This question remains unresolved and continues to haunt minds. Was it merely gold, the untold riches of a fallen order? Or was it something far greater, something that transcended material value? Some researchers believe the Holy Grail was not a physical cup at all, but a symbol, a bloodline, a family lineage leading directly from Christ himself. Others point to the Ark of the Covenant, which, according to tradition, unleashed divine power upon those who possessed it. Either of these artifacts would have been too dangerous to leave in Europe, too tempting for greedy kings, and too threatening to the authority of popes. And so, the mind turns again to the relentless waves that, with age-old rhythm, caress the shores of Oak Island. They move as if patiently waiting for something, waiting for those seekers daring enough to begin excavating, persistent enough to ask deep questions, or perhaps reckless enough to disturb the peace of what, by all accounts, was meant to remain hidden. For over 2 centuries, this enigmatic place has drawn treasure hunters, inquisitive scholars, and tireless dreamers. Each has arrived convinced they stood on the very threshold of a grand revelation. And yet, despite all efforts, the island itself continues to maintain its vow of silence. Is it possible that Oak Island was never intended to reveal its innermost truth? Perhaps its mystery is its true purpose, a way to ensure that this secret remains untouched until some predestined time. Or does the true treasure lie not in the ground beneath its surface, but in the very sense of wonder, in the countless questions that ripple out like waves, connecting medieval knights with modern adventurers, ancient relics with long-forgotten journeys, faith with profound doubt? The question of what lies beneath the waves is not limited to what was buried. It is much deeper. It is about why it was hidden, and who precisely wished for this secret to remain untouched. And as one delves deeper into the layered history of Oak Island, one inevitably finds oneself on the shifting boundary between confirmed facts and mystical legend, between what has been erased from memory and what still faintly whispers in the tide. So settle in comfortably. Allow the soothing sound of the sea to guide your thoughts and follow the faint trail of clues. For if Oak Island truly holds the relics of the Knights Templar, then beneath its soil rests not just ordinary treasure, but the very heart of forgotten history, awaiting its moment. It was 1795. One can imagine a warm summer evening in picturesque Nova Scotia, when the air was thick with the rich scent of pine, and the incessant chirping of crickets carried across Mahone Bay. 3 young boys, full of carefree energy, wandered across Oak Island, and their eyes were suddenly drawn to a peculiar sight hidden beneath the sprawling branches of ancient oaks. The earth in this spot appeared clearly disturbed, as if someone had long and diligently worked it. And above the surface of the soil, a curious depression curved, taking the form of a shallow pit. Nearby, according to ancient lore, ghostly lights occasionally flickered, shimmering lanterns that glided through the night, as if someone or something unseen was still attentively watching the place. The boys were gripped by genuine curiosity. Armed with youthful courage and the thrilling excitement that always accompanies a mystery, they began to dig. What they discovered was far from an ordinary plot of land. Barely a few feet deep, they struck solid stone and then a layer of logs. Beneath these logs lay another layer of soil, and then wood again. All of it was organized with astonishing precision, almost as if someone had planned this construction many centuries before their arrival. Each new discovery only deepened the overall mystery. Who could have undertaken such colossal efforts on such a remote island, so far from the powerful nations of Europe? Their shovels clanged, echoing this enigma, creating a rhythm that seemed to beat in time with their growing excitement. However, there was also a certain unease. This place did not seem like a natural formation. It looked built, like a carefully crafted doorway, designed for secure protection. The soil was unusually dense, and the logs were too ordered. Someone had created this pit with a specific intent. Someone wanted it to be found, or perhaps to never be found. As they stubbornly continued to dig deeper, sweat streamed down their faces under the scorching summer sun, and the youths again encountered logs, first at a depth of 10 feet, then at 20, and then at 30 feet. The layers seemed endless, each separated by earth, and each spurred them to continue their explorations. It seemed as if the pit was constructed specifically to test their resolve. For many, it soon became known as the Money Pit. Although even in the earliest accounts, people already suspected that it might hold something far more valuable than just coins or jewels. Rumors spread with incredible speed through the small communities along the Nova Scotia coast. Tales of buried treasure flew from one hearth to another, carried by whispers of daring pirates and powerful kings. Some claimed it must be the long-lost fortune of Captain Kidd, the infamous privateer. Others suggested it was the plunder of long-forgotten corsairs who once sought refuge in these hidden coves. But as the stories grew with new details, a darker question arose. What if this was not the work of pirates at all? What if it was the creation of some secret brotherhood? One that possessed deep knowledge of engineering, of symbols, of mysteries that were far deeper and more significant than mere gold. Even in those early days, this pit exuded a special aura extending beyond an ordinary treasure hunt. There was an inexplicable weight to it, an unsettling premonition of a carefully planned design. Local fishermen spoke of strange sounds that carried across the water at night, echoes resembling either singing or distant bells. Ancient Mi'kmaq tales even hinted that the island was unsafe, that its soil carried curses brought from across the sea. But the boys did not stop. With each wooden platform they uncovered, they felt an increasing sense of approaching something truly monumental. The pit became a challenge for them, a puzzle, an invitation. And yet, it was also a warning. For with every foot they advanced deeper, the island seemed to resist, as if reminding them that what was buried here should not be disturbed by unworthy hands. The legend of Oak Island was born that very summer, from a blend of curiosity and courage, from the earth itself and its silence, and once that whisper began, it could not be contained. From tiny fishing villages to the opulent halls of wealthy investors, news of the mysterious pit spread like wildfire. Adventurers arrived, shovels in hand, and dreams full of hope, convinced they stood on the verge of a great discovery. But Oak Island remains a patient guardian. It allows only a glimpse, offers hints, promises untold treasures, but never reveals the full truth. Those first excavations in 1795 yielded neither gold nor priceless relics, leaving behind only a pile of unresolved questions. And questions, as would soon become apparent, often possess far greater power than the most exhaustive answers. For what is hidden beneath the island's depths belongs not merely to the earth. It is an integral part of history itself. And history, when buried, resists with all its might, unwilling to reveal its secrets. By the early 19th century, the mystery of Oak Island was firmly rooted in people's minds. Whispers of strange, unnatural layers beneath the soil, of logs skillfully laid like steps of a secret staircase, spread far beyond Nova Scotia's humble fishing communities. This news reached wealthy individuals driven by an insatiable thirst for adventure and a desire for glory. Soon, they pooled their resources and gathered the necessary tools to continue the work where the three young men had left off. This marked the beginning of the first systematic excavations of what would forever be known as the Money Pit. Imagine the scene: a dozen hard-working laborers, their boots sinking into the damp earth, their hands calloused from the continuous use of pickaxes and shovels, digging into the stubborn layers of soil. Their labor was not aimless or chaotic. Every 10 feet of descent invariably revealed the same ominous pattern, carefully laid crossbeams, as if marking invisible thresholds or steps into an abyss. This was clearly not a whim of nature or a random accumulation of wood. Some unknown architect had erected this complex structure, with the purpose that anyone who dared to penetrate it would be aware of every step taken, yet remain unable to complete their descent. As the men went deeper, the pit ceased to be merely a hole in the ground. It transformed into something more, a descent into silence, a journey guided by the will of unseen creators. The air grew noticeably cooler, and the sunlight gradually faded, giving way to gloom. Every creak of the logs supporting the walls echoed, as if warning of an intrusion into an ancient and carefully planned design. At a depth of 90 feet, the shaft surpassed any they had seen before, yet still yielded no expected treasures, only multiplied the riddles. Then came a discovery that fundamentally changed the nature of the search. Among the layers of earth and wood, the diggers found a flat stone, etched with strange signs. These symbols were crudely made, but with clear intent, unlike anything these men had ever seen. Later generations claimed the stone bore a message. 40 feet below, 2 million pounds are buried. However, what if this message was never intended for such a simple interpretation? What if it didn't concern monetary wealth at all, but spoke of concealment, of something so sacred and significant that it couldn't be named directly? Nevertheless, the work continued. With each new level, the workers' expectations soared to unprecedented heights. The deeper they descended, the stronger grew their conviction that untold treasures awaited them just beyond the next layer. But the island itself, it seemed, had entirely different plans. At a depth of 90 feet, at the very moment excitement peaked, water began to seep in. At first, it was a thin trickle. Then it turned into a powerful torrent, surging through the invisible veins of the island itself. The shaft rapidly filled with seawater, unstoppable and icy, as if the earth itself had awakened to defend its secrets. This was not a collapse of loose soil or a simple geological accident. Further excavations revealed the existence of tunnels, deliberately laid from the bay directly to the pit, and designed to flood it if anyone dared to penetrate too deeply. This was not a mere vault or refuge. It was a veritable fortress, built in the deepest secrecy, whose defensive systems were created with an ingenuity centuries ahead of its time. Who could have designed such an engineering marvel? Were they pirates, driven only by greed, but lacking such complex engineering skills? Or was it the work of some disciplined brotherhood, equally skilled in both construction and the art of concealment? Perhaps the very brotherhood that vanished from Europe under the cloak of persecution in the early 14th century. The men made desperate attempts to pump out the surging water. They tried digging bypass shafts next to the flooded pit. However, each attempt invariably ended in failure, as if the island itself refused to yield. The treasure seemed so close, so near that it could almost be felt, but it was protected by the sea itself, impregnable and relentless. Many left the island ruined, penniless, mocked by neighbors who saw only reckless folly in their endeavor. And yet, the allure of this enigmatic pit never faded, for in every collapse, in every defeat suffered by the diggers, they felt something far grander than themselves, pressing upon their most cherished dreams. This was no ordinary treasure hunt in the usual sense. It seemed they had stumbled upon an ancient game, whose rules were carved in deep secrecy, and whose guardians had long vanished into the depths of history. Even now, one can vividly imagine them resting at night, by the flickering light of lanterns, gazing into the dark, gaping mouth of the pit. The earth beneath them seemed to breathe, as if in anticipation. The men whispered quietly among themselves, "What lies down there? Gold, priceless relics, or something far more ancient than human memory, something hidden with such incredible care that even centuries couldn't expose it." The excavations began, and with them, the legend of Oak Island gained its own immortal life. This was not a trivial story of buried treasure, but a comprehensive mystery that spanned oceans and centuries, relentlessly calling to those willing to risk everything for even a fleeting glimpse of the forbidden. Thus, the first true battle between man and island unfolded, not with shovels and pickaxes, but with water. Imagine the scene. Exhausted diggers standing at the pit's edge, their faces caked with earth, their muscles aching from weeks of arduous toil. At a depth of 90 feet, their hearts pounded with growing anticipation. At any moment, they thought, their tools would strike the wood and stone concealing a vault filled with gold, gleaming jewels, or perhaps something far more unusual and enigmatic. But then came a strange sound, a slow, ominous hiss of water breaking through the earth. Within hours, that thin trickle turned into a powerful torrent. The pit rapidly filled, as if the boundless ocean itself had been summoned to intervene. Pumps were brought in, imperfect mechanisms, typical of the early 19th century. However, no matter how desperately the men worked, the water invariably returned. It didn't matter how quickly they tried to pump it out. The pit, it seemed, possessed a will of its own, determined to bury its secret forever. What they didn't yet know was that they were confronting not just water, but a complex system of flood tunnels, skillfully carved channels that connected the money pit to the ocean. Later generations of researchers at Smith's Cove uncovered layers of tightly packed coconut fiber and seagrass. These unusual, non-native materials served as filters for the seawater, drawing moisture into the pit through secret openings. These were not natural formations. They were created with deliberate intent. Someone had ingeniously adapted the island itself to protect what was buried within its depths. But who could have erected such a grand structure? Pirates, driven by greed, but lacking deep engineering knowledge. Or was it the work of some disciplined order, skilled in both erecting massive structures and in concealment? The very brotherhood that vanished from Europe under the cloak of secrecy in the early 14th century. Their builders constructed mighty fortifications in Jerusalem, erected abbeys across Europe, and built castles capable of withstanding sieges by entire armies. Could Oak Island have been their last refuge? Their most hidden citadel, built not of stone towers, but of hidden underground vaults, extending deep into the earth. The flooding of the pit rapidly became a powerful symbol, as if the treasure, whatever it was, possessed a will of its own, expressing its unwillingness to be found. Every attempt to drain it proved futile. Digging additional shafts only led to new collapses, and the water rushed back again, cold and relentless. The men cursed the island, but also revered it, for it seemed not merely a geographical point, but a mighty guardian. The legend grew. The island, people said, was cursed. Some believed the waters were enchanted, that the ocean itself had been summoned to protect the relics. Others saw in the tunnels the activity of some secret brotherhood that understood not only the methods of erecting such fortifications, but also the deep necessity for their creation. And so, the flood tunnels became more than just physical obstacles. They became the embodiment of a deep truth. Oak Island would not yield easily. Its mystery was designed to withstand the test of time, outliving many generations. Every attempt to penetrate its innermost depths met with stubborn resistance, as if the chronicle of time itself stood guard at its threshold. Even today, as the mechanisms of modern technology rumble, the same intractable problem persists. Pumps function, drills pierce the rock. But the waters invariably return, filling the shaft with the same relentless fidelity as 2 centuries ago. As if the Templars themselves are sending their message across the centuries. This is not for you. What if the water is not just a physical obstacle, but an encrypted message? An eternal reminder that what is hidden here was meant for careful preservation, not thoughtless extraction. What if the flooding is the island's voice, proclaiming that humanity is not yet ready for what lies in its depths? The flood tunnels were activated on that momentous day in 1804 and have not rested since. And with their continuous flow, they tell an ominous tale. Sometimes the soil itself conspires to preserve the secret. As the water rose, and with it, the last hope seemed to vanish, yet another striking discovery was made, one that haunted everyone who set foot on Oak Island. Approximately at the 90-foot mark, before the shaft finally submerged into the depths of the sea, the diggers extracted a massive stone slab from the earth, heavy, regular, rectangular in shape, and surprisingly smooth. Engraved upon it were signs, mysterious symbols that none of those present could decipher. The stone was unlike any local rock in Nova Scotia. Its surface was flat, as if created by skilled craftsmen, not shaped by the elements of time. The signs engraved upon it were neither English, nor French, nor Mi'kmaq, nor Norse. It was something utterly alien, enigmatic hieroglyphs, as if whispering a hidden code. Some searchers suggested that the signs were arranged in neat rows, like a meaningful sentence. Others insisted they recognized crosses integrated into the overall pattern. The slab was lifted and later placed over a fireplace in a local house, where it became an object of unending speculation. Over time, one supposed translation emerged. 40 feet below, 2 million pounds are buried. This was a tempting assurance that fueled the intrigue surrounding Oak Island for generations. However, today many are inclined to consider this translation nothing more than fiction. After all, what is the point of so carefully hiding wealth if a clear indicator of its location and value is left behind? Perhaps the signs were not intended for deciphering by strangers at all. Perhaps they were a complex cipher, a formidable warning, or even a sacred seal designed to protect a cherished vault. Some scholars pointed to the similarity of these symbols with codes used by early Masonic lodges, which, at least according to tradition, were custodians of Templar secrets. Could it be that the stone served not as a marker, but rather as an unbreakable barrier, a warning sign that unequivocally stated, "Something sacred rests here. Touch at your peril"? One can imagine a group of researchers, huddled closely around a blazing campfire, their gazes fixed on the ancient stone, whose surface was traversed by dancing shadows. In this flickering light, the inscribed symbols seemed to come alive, silently whispering of secrets that loomed close by, yet remained elusive. The question arose, had they discovered not merely an abode of wealth, but something far more formidable, a relic that perhaps was never meant to reappear in the world? Over the centuries, the stone itself vanished. Some claim it was irrevocably lost, while others believe it was completely destroyed. Only a few persistently insist that the artifact still exists, hidden by someone who feared its potential consequences. Only scattered sketches, written accounts, and a haunting premonition remain, suggesting that the object held a message far more significant than mere jewels. If this slab was indeed authentic, then it designates Oak Island not as a haven for pirate hordes or banal treasures, but as the stage for a purposeful, encrypted design. Someone centuries earlier had not only buried something, but also left behind a symbolic language, intended exclusively for those who already held the key, and who, in the annals of history, was most skilled in deciphering codes, in recognizing secret signs, in understanding hidden knowledge. The answer suggests itself: the Knights Templar. The Knights Templar, as is known, marked their temples and structures with crosses that simultaneously served as encrypted maps. They skillfully hid their innermost secrets in symbols, readable only by initiates. Their rich legacy subsequently intertwined with the traditions of Masonic lodges, spreading as unspoken traditions across entire continents. Could the stone from Oak Island be another missing link in this carefully hidden chain? Perhaps the artifact itself disappeared, but its essence, its message, continues to live on in memory. It silently testifies to us that what is hidden beneath Oak Island was not the result of chance or a simple coincidence. On the contrary, it was a deliberate act, skillfully sealed with signs intended to transmit information across centuries. But for whom was this message intended? For us, curious researchers intruding on others' secrets, or for descendant guardians who still await the day the secret will finally be revealed? Beneath the shifting surface of the earth, the stone's symbols still echo, serving as a language of shadows and whispers, and perhaps, in their silent enigma, they proclaim that the true treasure of Oak Island is not the material riches buried beneath the ground, but the unresolved history itself, a question that refuses to fade. By the mid-19th century, the mystery of Oak Island had transformed from a local oddity into a veritable all-consuming obsession. Every unsuccessful excavation attempt, every sudden ground collapse, every flooding incident only exacerbated the already profound mystery. And with each passing generation, the question became sharper: who could have erected such an intricate system of traps and underground passages many centuries before the first European settlers even marked these shores on their maps? Some speculated that pirates were behind the mystery, naming Captain Kidd or perhaps Blackbeard, who were notorious for hiding their treasures in remote, forgotten coves. However, the level of complexity and engineering displayed in the construction of the so-called money pit was entirely inconsistent with the image of hasty and ill-considered actions by sea raiders. Pirates typically buried their loot shallowly, expecting to retrieve it within a few years, not centuries. The labyrinth of Oak Island, however, was something different. It was designed for the long-term protection of its contents for many centuries, to withstand not only potential robbers, but also the inexorable passage of time itself. Thus, unspoken assumptions naturally turned to the figure of the Knights Templar. These warrior monks, existing in the 12th and 13th centuries, were more than just crusaders. They were outstanding master builders, skilled financiers, and ingenious engineers. It was they who erected impregnable fortresses throughout the Holy Land, laid secret tunnels beneath ancient Jerusalem, and developed complex water systems that continue to baffle modern archaeologists to this day. If anyone possessed the necessary knowledge and skill to create secret, floodable channels beneath a remote island, it was undoubtedly them. However, a legitimate question arises: why here? Why Nova Scotia, a land generally believed to have been completely unknown to Europeans during the Middle Ages? Or was it known to them after all? Some researchers hypothesize that the Templars, fleeing brutal persecution in 1307, directed their fleet westward from La Rochelle. Ships vanished without a trace from French ports, their precious cargo entirely undocumented. Could they have made a transatlantic voyage long before Columbus's famous journey, carrying relics that were too dangerous to fall into the hands of kings or popes? Let's look at the chronology. In 1307, the French monarch Philip IV the Fair took decisive action to eradicate the Templar order, confiscating all their vast wealth and declaring them heretics. Overnight, the most powerful and influential order in Christendom was virtually destroyed. However, their untold treasures, their extensive archives, and quite possibly their most sacred relics were never found. If one assumes they transported these valuables on the aforementioned ships, then the strictest secrecy dictated the need to hide them in a place so remote and so inaccessible that no monarch could reach it. And what about the unique defensive structures of Oak Island? They resemble not a pirate's treasure trove, but a fortress without walls, a complex trap skillfully crafted from earth and water, designed to vigilantly guard something extremely sacred. Could this place have served as the Templars' last refuge, built not to protect human lives, but to preserve a great secret? The available evidence is circumstantial, but it is felt in the air, like the scent of incense in the dim light of an ancient chapel. This refers to carved stones with crosses, a lead artifact in the shape of a Templar cross, discovered centuries later in the Earth's depths, and symbols on boulders that strikingly resemble Masonic patterns. However, none of these facts, by themselves, constitute irrefutable proof of the Templar presence. And yet, when viewed in conjunction, these hints eloquently whisper of an ancient lineage of secrecy. For the Masons themselves have, for centuries, claimed their origin from the Templar tradition. If later generations of Masons did indeed show interest in Oak Island, perhaps it was due to an inner feeling that their distant predecessors had been there first. The Templar connection is not an established fact, not an undeniable truth carved in stone. It is rather a shifting shadow, an intriguing suggestion, a tantalizing possibility that relentlessly haunts the imagination. But one must listen more closely. In every whisper emanating from Oak Island's history, in every legend of hidden and carefully guarded treasures, the echo of the Templars sounds not just as a reverberation of warrior knights or skilled bankers, but as a reminder of guardians. Guardians who, perhaps, chose this remote shore as the last refuge for the most forbidden relics of Christendom. And if this hypothesis is correct, then Oak Island represents not just a mystery of hidden riches. It is a profound mystery of faith, power, and a legacy that humanity, perhaps, was never meant to reveal. The date October 13th, 1307, is forever etched in the annals of history as a dark day, marking the collapse of the Templar order throughout France. This event unfolded as a result of a carefully planned and coordinated operation. By royal decree, royal envoys suddenly descended upon Templar commanderies, arresting their leaders and confiscating all their possessions. Those who dared to resist were beaten, bound, and led away, and those who succumbed to agonizing torture and testified were immediately declared heretics. Thus, the once mighty and proud order, which for centuries had defended pilgrims and managed colossal wealth, was virtually destroyed within a single night. However, despite the widespread repression, not all members of the order were captured, and not all their traces were erased from the face of the earth. Chronicles of the time indicate the mysterious disappearance of the Templar fleet from the port city of La Rochelle. Various versions of events exist. Some historians claim the ships were seized by the French crown, while others insist that the vessels managed to evade pursuit. According to this version, under the cloak of deep night, sails were raised, and the fleet carried away not only property, but also, perhaps, the order's true treasures. It is noteworthy that the true value was likely not precious metals or stones. It is speculated that these were ancient, perhaps even dangerous, sacred objects and relics that the knights deemed impossible to entrust to either the church or monarchical authority. One can only imagine these ships, burdened not only with material cargo, but also with a great purpose, cutting through the seas. Where was this mysterious fleet headed? Perhaps to Scotland, where sympathetic lords and already exiled Templars could provide a safe haven, or possibly to Portugal, where the order later quietly revived under a new name, the Order of Christ. But there are bolder assumptions, that they traveled even further beyond the then-known world, to places where their secrecy would be absolutely guaranteed. It is remarkable that if the famous labyrinth on Oak Island was indeed erected in the early 14th century, this dating aligns astonishingly precisely with the presumed period of the fleet's disappearance. Thus, it could well have been the work of exiled guardians, the Knights Templar, who decided to preserve their priceless burden at all costs, even if it required securely hiding it from the encroachments of kings, popes, and even from human memory itself. It is worth considering with what astonishing care the island's defenses were designed and built. It is clear that this was not the result of hasty or ill-considered work. The creation of such a facility would have required deep planning, colossal effort, and unwavering dedication. Erecting such a grand vault would have taken not just years, but perhaps even decades, and would have demanded the exceptional discipline for which the Knights Templar were famous. These were not desperate fugitives, haphazardly burying coins in random pits. On the contrary, they acted as true architects of secrecy, guardians deeply convinced that they were fulfilling some higher purpose. A legitimate question arises: what exactly was the object of such careful protection? Some researchers suggest ancient manuscripts, perhaps even lost gospels, that could tell a completely different story of Christ's life, texts so dangerous that their existence in Europe would have been impossible. Others whisper of powerful relics, the Holy Grail, the Ark of the Covenant, or the untold treasures of Solomon's Temple, supposedly discovered by the Templars during the Crusades. However, there is an even darker theory, that the Knights Templar were custodians of proof of a bloodline, a dynastic line, whose revelation could undermine the very foundations of the Church's power and authority. Regardless of what they guarded, be it sacred relics, secret records, or certain revelations, the concealment was absolute and uncompromising. To preserve their priceless cargo, the Knights Templar, quite possibly, consciously sacrificed their own place in history. Their once glorious names were slandered, their majestic order was destroyed, and surviving members were scattered across the world. And yet, their great secret, if Oak Island is indeed their handiwork, continues to be preserved in deep silence, hidden beneath the earth and sea. The exiled guardians left behind no charters, no written records, not even any known maps, and perhaps this was their design. For if the treasure they carried was so dangerous that it could lead to the complete destruction of a powerful order, then probably it was also too dangerous to ever be revealed to the world. Thus, that mysterious fleet embarked on its journey, becoming part of an age-old legend, and Oak Island now whispers of itself as a possible refuge for these knights. It is a place where exiled guardians could build not just a secure vault, but a true sanctuary, a kind of tomb for secrets that proved too grand and dangerous for the open world. The notion of medieval ships daring to cross the boundless expanse of the Atlantic Ocean might, at first glance, seem utterly improbable. Nevertheless, historical archives contain intriguing hints and tantalizing evidence that suggests such an undertaking was not entirely impossible. After all, the Knights Templar were not merely valiant warriors and custodians of mystical knowledge. They were also experienced and skilled mariners. Their fleet was considered one of the largest and most powerful in Europe, and their dominance of sea routes could rival even the influence of great trading republics like Venice and Genoa. From the sunny ports of the Mediterranean to the harsh harbors of the North Sea, their proud banners once unfurled over vessels carrying pilgrims, vital grain, and contingents of soldiers across vast stretches of water. And so, a pertinent question arises. When the Templar fleet mysteriously vanished from La Rochelle in 1307, could some of these ships have set a course for the west instead of the usual eastern direction? For the inhabitants of medieval Europe, the ocean represented not only a terrifying frontier of the unknown, but also an alluring prospect of new discoveries. However, even in those distant times, vague rumors and whispers circulated among people about the existence of lands beyond the Great Sea. Scandinavian sagas spoke of Vinland, a fertile coast situated across the Atlantic, where Leif Erikson and his brave companions established settlements centuries before the events described. Could the Knights Templar have inherited fragments of these ancient stories? And could sympathetic Scandinavians, connected to the order by ties of trade or solemn vows, have shared their geographical knowledge with the exiled brothers? Imagine this odyssey. Large cogs and caravels, sturdy and purposeful, silently glided into the boundless Atlantic night. No banners unfurled above their masts, for the strictest secrecy served as their reliable shield. The holds of these ships were likely filled not with gold or jewels intended for extravagance, but with priceless relics that needed to be securely hidden, sacred objects that the world at that time was not yet ready to comprehend or accept. Guided by the stars and driven by desperate determination, they crossed the vast, silent expanse of the ocean, searching for a shore untouched by papal decree or royal edict. And when land appeared on the horizon, Nova Scotia, With its countless bays and islands, it must have seemed to them an ideal refuge. Remote, isolated, shrouded in thick fog and tall pines, it offered a place where a vault could be built, deep and hidden enough to preserve its secrets, not for years, but for many centuries. A number of researchers point to intriguing cartographic evidence that emerged on the European continent long before Christopher Columbus's famous journey. These ancient maps contain outlines of coastlines strikingly similar to those of North America, and they were created in an era when, according to conventional history, the existence of such lands remained a deep secret. A legitimate question arises: were these cartographic representations merely vague echoes of ancient Viking voyages, who, as is known, reached these shores? Or did they reach us through far more hidden and mysterious channels, ultimately falling into the hands of powerful and influential orders, such as the legendary Templars? Then, researchers' attention shifts to the very stones that lie on Oak Island. This refers to boulders etched with unusual signs, some of which strikingly resemble characteristic Templar crosses, while others look like ancient navigation symbols. A dilemma arises: are these markings merely whimsical results of natural erosion, or do they represent tangible traces of a long-forgotten grand journey? If the hypothesis that the Templars indeed managed to cross the boundless expanse of the Atlantic Ocean is correct, then Oak Island could well have been chosen by them as an ideal vault. It would have been a unique fortress, created by nature itself from earth and water, where their priceless relics could find eternal rest. In this remote corner, they needed neither mighty castles nor numerous armies. They only needed deep silence, absolute secrecy, and infinite time. Thus, crossing the Atlantic represented not merely a desperate flight from persecution. It could have been a conscious act of preservation, a deliberate choice aimed at reliably hiding what Europe, engulfed by the Inquisition and political intrigues, would not have allowed to exist. This is why, when one stands on the rocky shore of Oak Island, listening to the piercing cries of gulls circling overhead and the monotonous splash of waves breaking on the coastal boulders, one might not just be hearing the sounds of nature. In these noises, one might catch ghostly echoes of that very legendary journey. It was a journey that became a forced exile, which, however, did not end in bitter despair, but in the creation of a deeply hidden legacy, carefully buried deep within the earth. Indeed, long before that epical moment when Columbus dared to embark on his historic voyage, some European cartographic works already carried a silent whisper of lands whose existence, according to official records, no one should have known. Ancient maps, carefully preserved in deep monastic libraries or meticulously hidden in dusty trade archives, display very curious coastlines. Their outlines strikingly resemble specific parts of North America. On these unique documents, one can also find strange, sometimes half-encrypted notes, as if their creators drew their knowledge from sources not intended for public eyes. A striking example is one such map, attributed to the Venetian Zeno brothers, who lived in the 14th century. It details voyages westward across waters that the official history of the time categorically declared unexplored. Another, no less famous artifact is the Piri Reis map, dated 1513. It shows the contours of the American continents with such astonishing accuracy, as if it were drawn based on sources significantly older than Columbus himself. How could such detailed knowledge of unknown lands have existed at all? if no known sailor had officially reached these distant shores? Is it possible that the Templars themselves, fleeing brutal persecution, carried such secret maps with them? It is known that the Order's extensive network stretched far beyond a single continent, and its numerous agents moved freely between bustling ports, royal courts, and secluded monasteries. They were not only skilled bankers and talented builders, but also experienced navigators, possessing deep knowledge of seafaring. If anyone had a real opportunity to acquire forbidden information about lands lying beyond the boundless expanses of the Atlantic Ocean, it was precisely them. And if this hypothesis is correct, then Oak Island was discovered by them not by chance. On the contrary, it was chosen with a clear, deliberate intention. One can try to imagine such a hidden map, its ink, perhaps, already fading on yellowed parchment, and itself passed from hand to hand with careful whispers, full of deep trust. This would not be an ordinary map, marking the borders of kingdoms or familiar trade routes. No, it would be more like a guide to secret sanctuaries, to those secluded places where precious relics could be safely hidden, secure from the greedy power of kings and the intrigues of the Church. The question arises, did the Templars mark Nova Scotia on such a map, with its countless jagged bays, ideally suited for careful concealment, and its incredible remoteness, which guaranteed complete secrecy? A number of researchers suggest that Oak Island itself bears clear signs of some grand design, as if its natural landscape was intentionally shaped into a complex cipher. Stones arranged in amazing geometric patterns, strikingly resembling ancient navigation symbols, as well as boulders precisely aligned to the cardinal points, as if marking a ritual compass, serve as confirmation. To the untrained eye, such arrangements might seem merely natural accumulations, random scatterings created by nature. However, for those initiated into the mysteries, these markings are perhaps clear indications, a silent map skillfully carved into the very flesh of the island. In other words, the map leading to the treasures may not have been drawn on parchment at all. Perhaps the island itself is the map. Its ingenious flood tunnels, its deep hidden shafts, its carefully carved stones, each of these indications, each of these signs is intended to guide only those chosen who possess the key to its unraveling. As for the rest, that is, outsiders to whom we belong, they are left in a state of confusion, surrounded by semi-legends and the results of centuries of fruitless, exhausting excavations. However, if one assumes that such a map truly existed, whether drawn on fragile parchment or skillfully encrypted in the very structure of the earth, then Oak Island ceases to be just a random enigma. It transforms into a carefully chosen place, a final destination that was determined and governed by some secret knowledge. This becomes the concluding point in a great journey that began in the tragic ashes of the Templar Order. And perhaps the most poignant and eerie thought of all is this: what if this mysterious map was never truly lost? What if there are still those who carefully guard its key to this day? Descendants of ancient guardians who know with absolute precision what is hidden deep underground and why this treasure must remain untouched. The island itself, seemingly silent, constantly points, always guiding researchers deeper into its hidden depths. And as one follows these invisible lines, one delves further into the abyss of a mystery that extends not only across boundless oceans, but also through the succession of centuries, entering a forbidden geography of secrets that, by all appearances, were never meant to be revealed and seen. At the time when people first heard about Oak Island's mysterious money pit, their imagination painted pictures of untold riches, chests overflowing with gold coins, jewels dazzling on damp stone floors, and loot accumulated by ruthless pirates or powerful princes. However, as the decades inexorably passed, and the pit itself continued to reveal only more and more layers of its unprecedented mystery, demonstrating ingeniously floodable tunnels, enigmatic stones with engraved symbols, and incredibly complex advanced engineering, a completely different question began to form in the minds of researchers. What if the true treasure of Oak Island was not mundane material wealth at all? What if it was something far more sacred, something possessing incomparably greater spiritual or historical value, and simultaneously far more dangerous? Among the multitude of mysterious conjectures passed down by word of mouth, two ancient relics stand out particularly vividly: the enigmatic Holy Grail and the majestic Ark of the Covenant. In the collective consciousness of humanity, the Grail appears as a sacred cup, the very chalice that Jesus Christ raised during the Last Supper. And according to tradition, it was into this cup that his blood was collected at the moment of crucifixion, endowing it with inexhaustible power. Ancient tales claim that anyone who sips from this cup gains either immortality or wisdom surpassing all limits of human reason. Nevertheless, there are other traditions where the Grail is interpreted not as a material vessel, but as a deep symbol, perhaps even a bloodline, a carefully guarded blood connection, or a secret possessing such power that its revelation could pose an unthinkable threat to the foundations of the official church. The Ark of the Covenant, unlike the Grail, has an entirely different description in the sacred scriptures. It appears as a majestic chest, skillfully crafted from gold and acacia wood, originally intended for the careful storage of the tablets of the law given to Moses. Biblical texts testify that its very presence brought inevitable calamities and plagues to enemies, while granting the Israelites undeniable victory in battles. Careless touching of it, as traditions say, meant certain death. For many centuries, both theological scholars and tireless seekers of treasures and antiquities have never ceased to wonder about its fate. Some researchers are convinced that it still resides in Ethiopia, while others believe it is securely hidden beneath the ancient ruins of Jerusalem. But what if, in the whirlwind of the Crusades, amidst the general chaos, it was secretly removed, entrusted to the Knights Templar, and then transported across the ocean to find its final resting place on mysterious Oak Island? One should deeply ponder the astonishing engineering thought embodied in the depths of the so-called money pit. The complex traps designed for flooding, the treacherous tunnels engineered for collapse. This entire system seems incredibly sophisticated for ordinary treasures. It is clear that it served not to protect mundane gold. Its true purpose was to guard something sacred, something so powerful that it could radically alter the course of history for entire nations. If one assumes that the Holy Grail rests beneath Oak Island, then perhaps it is not the legendary cup at all, but rather priceless records, ancient parchments, hermetically sealed in waterproof containers. They could contain a detailed description of a truth capable of shaking the foundations of the entire Christian world, irrefutable proof of a sacred bloodline, or texts recounting a long-suppressed history. And if the Ark of the Covenant is there, then the flood tunnels might have been constructed not only for its concealment, but also for its containment, ensuring that the dangerous and powerful presence of this relic would never fall into the hands of careless and unprepared individuals. It is generally believed that legends, by their nature, tend to exaggerate. However, Oak Island seems to constantly offer very strange and intriguing hints. Among its finds were fragments of ancient parchment, coconut fibers utterly foreign to this region, and a lead cross strikingly resembling Templar relics found in European lands. Each such discovery suggests not merely the presence of hidden riches, but a deliberate design. It creates the impression that the relics were not just placed, but carefully preserved and securely protected. The Holy Grail and the Ark of the Covenant are not just objects, they are powerful symbols of divine presence, forbidden knowledge, and eternal safekeeping. If any of these sacred artifacts indeed rest beneath Oak Island, then this pit ceases to be just a complex puzzle. It transforms into a true tomb of colossal power, and perhaps it is for this very reason that it so stubbornly resists all attempts to reveal it. For some truths, once brought to light, can no longer be reburied, and so the question hangs in the air, like a silent, unheard prayer. Is Oak Island truly the resting place of the most sacred relics of Christendom? Or does it conceal something even wilder, something for which our language simply has no suitable words yet? As tireless shovels, mighty pickaxes, and later modern drilling rigs persistently gnawed at the bedrock of Oak Island, they extracted from its depths far more than just wood and water. From time to time, very curious artifacts surfaced, though small and fragmented, yet incredibly tantalizing, as if the island itself was cautiously lifting the veil on its mystery, but by no means wishing to reveal it entirely. At an impressive depth of 90 feet, boreholes once brought to light tiny scraps of parchment, fragile and yellowed by the relentless passage of time, with barely discernible traces of ancient ink. The letters on them were too small to decipher, yet their very presence in such an unusual place spoke volumes. Who would, centuries ago, so carefully and deeply bury manuscripts beneath layers of earth and wood, unless the knowledge they contained required absolute protection? Could these precious scraps be fragments of early Gospels, records of sacred bloodlines, or perhaps texts so dangerous that their preservation in ordinary European libraries would have been unthinkable? In another of the many shafts, tireless seekers stumbled upon an unusual accumulation of coconut husk fibers, a material utterly foreign to Nova Scotia's flora, yet laid in a thick layer as a kind of padding. Some researchers speculated that these fibers might have served as a filter for the complex flood tunnel system, preventing them from clogging with silt. However, a legitimate question arises. Why import such an exotic material from distant overseas lands, unless the builders were experienced mariners with wide access to international trade routes? Is this not another silent hint of the presence of the Templars, whose ships traversed the seas from the Levant to the Atlantic, and whose secret networks spanned entire continents? Among other finds were various iron objects, rusty and heavily corroded by the relentless passage of time, their original forms half lost due to corrosion. Some researchers suggest these could have been tools left by the first treasure seekers. Others insist they are much older, perhaps medieval tools directly related to the very process of constructing the mysterious pit. However, One discovery captivated the public imagination more than any other. This refers to a small lead cross, found not in the money pit itself, but on the island's surface. Its shape is striking, almost identical to the characteristic Templar crosses that can be seen carved on the walls of ancient chapels in France. Could it have been accidentally dropped by one of those exiled guardians many centuries ago, while they secretly labored to hide their priceless cargo? Skeptical minds, of course, argue that such artifacts do not provide sufficient evidence. They might contend that the cross could have belonged to later settlers. The parchment could be a result of careless storage, and the fibers could be part of ordinary ship's cargo. And yet, when all these fragments are viewed collectively, they begin to form a pattern. A pattern that appears far less random and more like the barely discernible edges of a grand tapestry, the full picture of which we are not yet able to comprehend. Each of these artifacts is like a quiet whisper from the depths of the past, fragile and incomplete. None of them individually is sufficient to irrefutably prove the presence of legendary relics. None of them can fully unravel the age-old mystery. And perhaps therein lies the true meaning. Oak Island allows only a glimpse of its secrets, never granting full certainty, as if reminding us that some mysteries are meant to exist forever, tantalizing generations. However, when one holds this lead cross, cold and palpably heavy, it is almost impossible not to feel the weight of centuries. It is difficult not to imagine a Templar knight, exiled and persecuted, pressing it to his chest in silent prayer, before forever entrusting his precious cargo to the earth. One involuntarily wonders, does the soil of Oak Island hold not only mythical treasure, but the very relics that once ignited the flames of great events in Europe? Artifacts, though they may be mere fragments, serve as powerful invitations. Each beckons researchers deeper, urging them to continue excavating not just into the island's depths, but into the very fabric of history. As new generations of diggers and those who dreamed of great discoveries arrived on Oak Island, the mystery began to extend far beyond just the soil and seawater. The question was no longer solely about engineering feats, but about symbols, strange signs skillfully carved in stone, engraved on tree trunks, and passed down in local lore. Many began to suspect that Oak Island itself was a kind of cipher, a riddle written in earth and stone. Some of the first seekers reported boulders etched with curious signs, lines, and crosses that appeared purposeful, though they had been eroded by centuries of wind and rain. Several swore that, when viewed from above, the stones formed clear patterns, triangles, crosses, or compasses that echoed the sacred geometry so beloved by the Knights Templar and their supposed heirs, the Masons. And then came the legendary inscribed stone, extracted from the money pit at a depth of 90 feet. Its symbols became forever etched in memory, though precise records of them may not have been fully preserved. To this day, scholars and enthusiasts fiercely debate the meaning of these markings. Was it a warning, a detailed guide, or a statement of ownership? Theories range from primitive pirate shorthand to a complex Masonic code. Each interpretation seems plausible enough, but none can be definitively proven. Masons, in particular, were deeply drawn to this mystery. In the 19th century, many of those who financed and led the excavations on Oak Island were members of the Brotherhood, individuals immersed in allegory and secret symbols. For them, Oak Island was more than an ordinary treasure hunt. It was a pilgrimage into the unknown, an echo of rituals that spoke of hidden knowledge and lost wisdom. Could it be that the reason Masons felt compelled to dig here was that they recognized something familiar? Traces of their spiritual ancestors, the Templars. Some researchers subscribe to this view. For in the halls of lodges and ancient Masonic manuscripts, traditions often hint at the survival of Templar secrets, long after the Order's supposed destruction. If Oak Island truly bore Templar signs, then this was not just another mystery. It was a continuation of sacred guardianship. Ciphers, of course, thrive on ambiguity. Every new theory inevitably begets the next. Every code invites immersion into yet another layer of speculation. Some claim that the arrangement of key features on the island, the money pit, Smith's Cove, the triangular swamp, forms a hidden diagram, a star map or a compass rose, pointing to something even grander. Others insist that these patterns are merely projections of wishing minds, creating meaning where none originally existed. However, codes are powerful not because they are solved, but because they suggest. They whisper that something lurks beneath the surface, something just out of reach. Oak Island thrives on this very assumption. Its stones, its carvings, its hidden alignments, all beckon the imagination into an endless labyrinth of possibilities. And perhaps this was the original design. Perhaps the builders wanted the uninitiated to get lost in countless interpretations, while only those with the true key could unlock the vault. For everyone else, the island remains an unread manuscript, a book of secrets whose language is symbols, and whose grammar is deep silence. To grasp the deeper allure of Oak Island, one must return to the 14th century, to the moment when the powerful Templar order was crushed by the crown and the church. Their fall was not merely a political maneuver, it was a veritable firestorm of accusations, designed to erase them not only from power, but from memory itself. The accusations were devastating: heresy, blasphemy, secret rites. They were accused of spitting on the cross, worshipping a mysterious head, and denying Christ himself. Many historians believe these accusations were fabricated, merely tools used by King Philip IV to justify the seizure of their immense wealth. However, the speed and ferocity of the persecution suggests something far greater. Perhaps it was fear that the Templars possessed knowledge too dangerous to leave uncontrolled. On that October night in 1307, hundreds of knights were dragged from their commanderies. Some were broken on the rack, their bodies stretched until bones cracked. Others were burned alive, their ashes scattered to the wind. Jacques de Molay, the last Grand Master, was tied to a stake on the Ile de la Cité in Paris. The flames mercilessly consumed him as he cried out a curse upon the Pope and the King. The smoke of his martyrdom still lingers in the legends of France. However, the persecutions of those days did not manage to completely destroy everyone. Many knights managed to escape, carrying with them precious possessions of the order, which could have been gold, sacred relics, or even forbidden truths. Thus, the spirit of the Templars continued to exist in Scotland, Portugal, and as some suggest, even beyond the Atlantic Ocean. The flames of persecution consumed their name, but not their profound legacy. It is in this context that Oak Island emerges in the historical narrative, like a shadow flickering at the edge of that ancient fire. For if the Templars indeed transported their sacred treasures across the seas, they undoubtedly needed a refuge, absolutely inaccessible to papal decree and its inquisitorial power. The complex system of traps inherent in the famous pit, its carefully guarded secrecy, its stubborn refusal to reveal its mysteries, all these features serve as a reflection of the deep despair of people who witnessed their brethren subjected to agonizing torture and their sacred faith betrayed. They did not merely seek to hide material treasures. Their goal was to protect these treasures from the very mighty forces that had once guided them. One need only consider with what astonishing care the island continues to resist any attempts at intrusion. Every flood, every ground collapse, every setback suffered by researchers seems not merely a coincidence, but a deliberate design, as if the innermost secret buried within its depths must remain hidden until the world is truly ready to comprehend it, or perhaps until the world is never ready. The fires of persecution that flared up in those distant times did far more than just end a powerful order. They scattered its seeds to all the winds of history, carrying them to the remotest corners. And perhaps, just perhaps, one of these seeds took deep root across the Atlantic, where the majestic pine forests of Nova Scotia whisper their ancient secrets over a hidden vault, and the soil itself has become a silent tomb for secrets too dangerous for the world above. In every fleeting glimpse of the mystery shrouding Oak Island, researchers to this day continue to see reflections of the flames of that fateful night in 1307, which consumed bodies but proved powerless before truths. The smoke of those terrible events has long since dissipated, but the whispers carrying echoes of the past remain. It is a whisper that persistently suggests that the island is not just a treasure mystery, but rather the last, silent testament of persecuted knights who consciously chose secrecy over shameful surrender. When it comes to the Templars and their irrevocably lost treasures, most people immediately imagine mountains of gold, chests overflowing with ancient coins, and jewels sparkling in the flickering light of torches. However, what if the true treasure they so desperately guarded was not material wealth at all, but a bloodline, a carefully hidden lineage, tracing its roots back to the very origins of Christianity? Some ancient legends suggest that the Templars, during their long stay in Jerusalem, discovered something far more significant than ordinary relics. Beneath the legendary Temple Mount, as these traditions claim, they found ancient manuscripts and sacred secrets preserved from time immemorial of Christ. Among these finds, there might have been records pointing to a deeply hidden truth, that Jesus had descendants, a bloodline that continued in complete silence, protected by those who dared to defy the mighty authority of the Church. If such knowledge truly existed, it would undoubtedly pose an enormous danger. To reveal it would mean openly challenging the very authority of Rome, undermining the centuries-old dogma upon which the entire ecclesiastical system was founded. And so, the Templars, quite possibly, chose for themselves the role of guardians. They became not only protectors of sacred relics, but also preservers of this mysterious bloodline, ensuring that the truth would survive, even if they themselves could not. Oak Island, in this captivating narrative, gains far greater significance than a mere vault. It transforms into a crypt of evidence. The flood tunnels, ingenious traps, enigmatic symbols carved in stone. Each of these elements is not just a barrier designed to protect gold, but rather a powerful barrier intended to protect memory itself. Perhaps the parchments were carefully sealed in waterproof barrels, their ancient ink recording genealogies or gospels that had long been erased from official scripture. Perhaps other relics were placed alongside them, chalices, crosses, or even bones that, according to tradition, contained holy blood. One should carefully consider the symbolism of the cross found on Oak Island, crafted in a manner characteristic of Templar relics from Europe. Was it accidentally dropped or deliberately left as a marker for future guardians? One should also pay attention to the parchment fragments extracted from the famous money pit, fragile and stained with ink. Were they merely scraps of long-forgotten testimonies, traces of words that were once meant to shake the foundations of faith? If the Templars truly guarded such a significant bloodline, this could well explain the brutality of their persecution. The Church might have tolerated wealth, perhaps even power, but it could never tolerate a challenge to its spiritual monopoly. To transport such sacred knowledge westward, to hide it beneath the layers of earth on a remote island, would have been an act of both daring defiance and the deepest devotion. And so Oak Island whispers not only of untold treasures, but of origins. It suggests that what is hidden within its depths is intended not for enrichment, but for a grand revelation. A revelation that, if brought to light, is capable of changing the very history of Christendom. Of course, we cannot have precise knowledge. The earth stubbornly keeps its silence, and the sea vigilantly guards its many channels. And yet, listening to the mysterious whisper of the island, researchers feel the full weight of this incredible possibility. Perhaps beneath these age-old layers of oak and stone lies a history that the world, perhaps, was never ready to hear. A history of bloodlines and sacred relics, carefully hidden by knights who consciously chose secrecy over humiliating surrender. For over 2 centuries, Oak Island has tested everyone who dared to seek its innermost secrets. Fortunes have been spent, families ruined, and human lives irrevocably lost. The island does not surrender easily, and for this reason, an ominous legend has arisen that an ancient curse lies upon it, demanding a terrible price. Local tradition persistently whispers that before the treasure can be found, 7 people must die. Only then, when this dreadful price has been paid in blood, will the island, perhaps, reveal its ultimate secret. This is a truly chilling prophecy that invisibly hangs in the minds of every generation of fearless treasure hunters. Death has repeatedly appeared on Oak Island, claiming the lives of people crushed by suddenly collapsing shafts, or those swallowed by treacherous flows of seawater. One researcher died from inhaling poisonous gases seeping from the depths of the earth. Each of these tragedies serves as a grim reminder that Oak Island ruthlessly rejects any intrusion into its mysteries. By some counts, 6 human lives have already been irrevocably lost. If the ancient curse proves true, then one more victim remains to fall before the coveted vault reveals its secrets. But is this ominous curse merely fiction, born from exhausted and frustrated diggers to somehow explain their endless misfortunes? Or is it something much deeper, skillfully woven into the very structure and design of the island? Could the Knights Templar, or whoever the true creators of the money pit were, have sealed their secret not only with engineering solutions, but also with some ritual? Medieval minds were deeply immersed in the world of symbolism. They sincerely believed in sacred numbers, in blood-sealed oaths capable of guarding relics of unimaginable power. Would they not have sought help from both the material and spiritual worlds. The number 7 itself, for example, is imbued with the deepest meaning: 7 days of creation, the 7 seals of the apocalypse, 7 virtues, 7 deadly sins. The demand for 7 lives could be more than simple superstition. It could well be a symbolic covenant, a kind of guarantee combining unwavering faith with inevitable fatality. Each new death in the modern era adds another sorrowful verse to this dark litany of the island. The families of the deceased mourn their losses, but the legend, meanwhile, only gains strength, as if the island itself has a thirst. The curse becomes an integral part of the island's defensive system, as effective as any ingenious flood tunnel. It serves as a formidable warning that the pursuit of the innermost secret comes with the risk of losing not only a fortune, but also one's very life. And so seekers come here with apprehension, constantly looking over their shoulder at the ominous shadow of the curse. And yet, they continue to arrive, for the promise of a great revelation proves stronger than any fear. What relic could have inspired such terrible sacrifices? What truth could have demanded such an exorbitant price? The curse of 7 hangs over the island like a thick fog, shrouding it with its ominous aura. Whether it is simple superstition or a carefully planned design, it serves as a reminder that some mysteries are not revealed easily. They must be paid for with sweat, sorrow, and blood. And until the 7th life is taken, or until the legend itself is finally destroyed, the heart of Oak Island will remain sealed, silently awaiting its hour beneath the earth and the waves. As centuries passed, the once mighty Templars dissolved into the shadows of history. Their name was cursed by kings, and their brethren scattered across the world. However, their whispers did not fall silent. They found new havens, new symbols, and new oaths, passed down in the rituals of another secret brotherhood, the Masons. Masonry, as an organized movement, emerged in Europe in the 17th and 18th centuries. Nevertheless, its traditions often had roots much deeper in the past. Its rites contained veiled references to Solomon's Temple, to hidden knowledge, to the guardianship of truths too sacred for ordinary eyes. And into these ancient traditions was woven the persistent rumor that the Masons were direct heirs to the Templar legacy. The parallels between the two orders are striking and numerous. Both brotherhoods deeply revered sacred geometry and architecture. Both concealed deep meaning in symbols, compasses, squares, crosses, and stars. Both spoke of initiation, strict secrecy, and the guardianship of sacred knowledge. For many researchers, the Masons were not merely imitators, but true heirs, preserving what the Templars had so carefully hidden from the world. And this is why, when Masons became involved in the mystery of Oak Island, as happened with several prominent archaeologists in the 19th century, it raised a host of troubling questions. Did they feel something familiar in the island's design, something that resonated with their own traditions? Did they recognize the traces of their spiritual ancestors, skillfully carved in stone and buried beneath centuries of earth? Even in the modern era, Masonic ties to the island persist. The lead cross discovered on the island not only strikingly resembles Templar symbols, but also distinctly echoes Masonic imagery. Symbols found engraved on neighboring stones are strikingly similar to Masonic ciphers. Was it simply a coincidence that Masons so often found themselves in the island's orbit, as if drawn by an invisible force? Or was it the attraction of a legacy far older than themselves, prompting them to solve a secret that their predecessors had so deeply buried. Some researchers hypothesized that Oak Island could even be a kind of Masonic temple, built not with traditional walls and towers, but with a complex system of shafts, tunnels, and precise alignments. Its geometry, some claim, forms a map of sacred proportions, a hidden diagram that connects Earth to the heavens. For the uninitiated, this might look like a chaotic accumulation of earthworks, but for those trained in the mysteries of masonry, it could whisper profound meaning. If this theory is correct, Oak Island is not just a place where treasures are hidden. It is a ritual landscape, an encrypted sanctuary where relics rest beneath layers of symbols and sacrifices. The Masons, consciously or unconsciously, may have been following a trail left by their predecessors, continuing an ancient guardianship begun by knights in white cloaks with red crosses. And so the echoes of the past deepen, becoming ever more distinct. The Templars fell in the fire of persecution, but their whispers were passed down by word of mouth in oaths and symbols. These echoes, in turn, found their way to Nova Scotia, where stone and water, it seemed, conspired to keep the secret sealed. Oak Island, therefore, represents not just a mystery for treasure hunters. It is a bridge between two great orders, linked across centuries by strict secrecy, sacred geometry, and the guardianship of truths that were never meant for ordinary eyes. From a bird's-eye view, Oak Island appears as a small and rather inconspicuous strip of land, like a crescent moon, clinging to the rugged coast of Nova Scotia. However, many researchers and enthusiasts are convinced that its very shape conceals a grand design, an encrypted geometry that serves as a key to its deeply buried mystery. Scholars have diligently traced imaginary lines connecting key points, such as the Money Pit, Smith's Cove, the enigmatic triangular swamp, and numerous scattered boulders located throughout the island. When combined, these points seemingly align into meaningful patterns, from regular triangles and clear crosses to even a complex star. Some proponents of this theory claim that the discovered geometry precisely reproduces the sacred proportions that were deeply revered by the Knights Templar, and subsequently by members of Masonic lodges, representing a hidden language of lines and angles whose primary purpose was to protect and conceal sacred, esoteric truths. Among the many hypotheses, one suggests that the entire island was carefully designed as a colossal compass rose, whose rays would intentionally point to significant earthly and celestial landmarks. Other researchers, in turn, insist that the swamp, which for a long time was perceived as a natural formation, is actually an artificially created structure. Its distinct triangular shape, in their opinion, is a deliberately embedded symbol, perhaps echoing the dogma of the Holy Trinity. If such claims are true, then the entirety of Oak Island appears not merely as a stage upon which a mystery unfolds, but as an integral, active part of the enigma itself. In the medieval era, the concept of sacred geometry held a central place in mystical teachings and practices. Majestic cathedrals were erected in strict accordance with its principles, and their walls were literally imbued with mathematical ratios that, it was then believed, reflected divine order and harmony. Applying such a complex design to a carefully hidden vault would have been both an extremely practical and deeply symbolic solution. Such geometry could have served as a kind of guiding map, directing future initiates to the coveted treasure, while ensuring that the uninitiated or outside observers saw only scattered, random accumulations of stones and natural swampy areas. No less intriguing are the alignments that, some researchers claim, connect Oak Island to very distant geographical points. If one draws lines on maps, they surprisingly connect the island to the legendary Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland, to ancient Jerusalem, and even to the mysterious Rennes-le-Château in France. Each of these places is itself shrouded in a dense veil of mystery, and each is inextricably linked in traditions and legends with the Templar order. A legitimate question arises: are these striking connections merely a series of random coincidences, or do they represent barely discernible traces of a grand global network of sacred sites, meticulously mapped using complex geometry that remains invisible to most ordinary people? Of course, skeptics decisively reject such patterns, considering them no more than a projection of human consciousness, a natural tendency for people to find forms and patterns where they do not actually exist. However, for those who, presumably, were keepers of sacred relics, geometry was something far more than just a mathematical discipline. It was a sacred ritual, deeply rooted in mystical traditions. To conceal a mystery using such a design meant weaving it into the very fabric of the cosmos, ensuring that the earth, sea, and heavens would unite their forces, conspiring for its protection. Thus, Oak Island, perhaps, is not merely a random refuge for treasures, but a carefully constructed symbol, a geometric testament, forever carved into the very landscape. Its numerous pits and intricate tunnels may represent only the physical body of this grand mystery, while the true soul lies in the form of the island itself, its striking alignments and internal proportions. If this hypothesis is correct, then solving the mystery of Oak Island lies not in digging deeper into the earth, but in looking wider, stepping back, carefully tracing all these lines, and finally seeing the hidden geometry that unites all elements into a single whole. And in doing so, one may begin to see not just a geographical object, but a deep message, skillfully written in earth and stone, patiently waiting for one who possesses the ability to read it. For many centuries, treasure seekers steadfastly concentrated all their attention on the legendary money pit, considering it the epicenter of all mysteries. However, one of Oak Island's most intriguing and enigmatic features is located elsewhere. It is the swamp. To an ordinary observer, it appears as a natural depression in the landscape, a typical triangular swampy area where reeds grow profusely and water stagnates. Nevertheless, many researchers are convinced that this swamp is by no means a random natural formation. Its distinct triangular shape is so striking that it seems almost too deliberate, raising suspicions of an artificial origin. Some researchers persistently claim that in the distant past, this area represented an open waterway, a wide channel that effectively divided the island into two separate parts. In their view, it was artificially filled in over time. Perhaps the purpose of such a large-scale undertaking was to mask some activity or to create a specific symbol. The question arises, was it specifically shaped to reflect the sacred image of the Holy Trinity? Or perhaps, was it intended to echo the form of a Masonic triangle? If these assumptions are true, then the swamp ceases to be just a random element of the landscape. It becomes a kind of signature, a sign left by those who created it. A series of very unusual discoveries only deepens the already complex mystery of this place. Beneath a thick layer of mud and silt, divers reported finding wooden structures, logs arranged in a manner that is extremely rare in natural conditions. During one research expedition, fragments of a platform were found, suggesting purposeful human activity once carried out here. In another, stones were discovered forming something that closely resembled a paved surface, hidden beneath centuries of accumulated silt. Indeed, why would anyone need to erect such complex structures in the middle of a swamp, unless their purpose was to conceal something extremely important within it? Furthermore, there are numerous traditions and accounts of coconut fibers found in this area, identical to those discovered in the Money Pit area. This again points to a material utterly foreign to Nova Scotia's natural flora, and evidently imported from distant overseas lands. Were they used for water filtration, as a kind of packing, or were they part of a larger engineering design linking the swamp and the pit into a single system? Some researchers even hypothesize that the swamp itself conceals a sunken ship. Perhaps it was the very ship that transported priceless relics across the Atlantic Ocean and was intentionally sunk and buried here, its mighty timbers still remaining hidden beneath a layer of mud and water. If this theory is correct, then the swamp may not just be part of the overall mystery, but its starting point, the last resting place of a kind of ark of exile for its mysterious guardians. When viewed from above, the triangular configuration of the swamp exhibits a striking symmetry, as if its shape was intentionally created for aerial observation. Thus, this area becomes not merely a place intended for concealment, but also a kind of channel for transmitting information, a geometric landmark for those who possess knowledge of what to seek. This is why the swamp, it seems, whispers its secrets. Its reed thickets reliably conceal, its waters are murky, and its viscous mud tenaciously holds every potential answer. The question arises, is this formation a natural landscape element, or was it artificially created? Does it serve as the last refuge for sunken ships and ancient relics, or is it a sacred symbol, skillfully carved into the very flesh of the island? No one knows the precise answer, and yet, many researchers lean towards the idea that the swamp, rather than the famous pit, may hold the true key to solving the Oak Island mystery. Like the rest of the island, it stubbornly resists revealing its secrets, offering only vague hints and scattered fragments. However, for those who cherish dreams of treasures hidden by exiled knights, the swamp is not just a bog. It is a deliberate veil, a skillfully constructed riddle, a mystery that lies in plain sight. As rumors of Oak Island's unsolved secrets multiplied in the 19th century, some researchers began to view its mysteries not only through the prism of the Templars, but also through the teachings of another mysterious brotherhood, the Rosicrucians. This enigmatic order, shrouded in many myths and legends, emerged in Europe, promising its followers access to hidden wisdom, alchemical knowledge, and esoteric truths. And like the Templars who preceded them, the history of the Rosicrucians was imbued with an atmosphere of the strictest secrecy and whispers of forbidden knowledge. Rosicrucians claimed that their origin was connected to the so-called Invisible College, a brotherhood of enlightened guardians who preserved sacred truths through complex symbols and codes. Their manifestos spoke of a deep transformation of man, society, and spirit through a secret science, accessible only to initiates. For some, they were eminent mystics and philosophers. For others, they were direct heirs to the Templar tradition, continuing the mission of preserving valuable relics and ancient bloodlines. It is not surprising that researchers soon began to perceive their invisible presence on Oak Island. The symbols found on the island's stones and trees strikingly resembled Rosicrucian emblems. Some researchers opined that the island itself, with its characteristic geometry of triangles and crosses, reflects diagrams found in ancient Rosicrucian texts, which represented cosmic maps intended to guide seekers to divine truth. Could the Rosicrucians have been drawn to Oak Island centuries after the fall of the Templar Order? Perhaps they recognized it as a sacred place, a vault of sacred relics, or perhaps, as some suggest, they themselves inherited the mission of its guardianship. From this perspective, Oak Island was not abandoned after the Templar Order ceased to exist. It remained an integral part of a continuous chain of secrecy, passed from one order to another, where each took an oath of silence, and each added new layers of symbols and riddles to the existing concealment. Rosicrucians were known to operate invisibly. Their members remained unknown, and their works were hidden in plain sight. This strikingly echoes Oak Island's unwillingness to reveal its secrets. To excavate here is to chase shadows, to see only scattered fragments, never comprehending the whole. This is the very essence of the Rosicrucian mystery, a truth that exists but remains reliably veiled. Some even hypothesize that Oak Island itself could have represented a kind of Rosicrucian temple. Its unique features are arranged like elements of an alchemical diagram. The pit, the swamp, the various alignments, all of this could have been parts of a carefully designed ritual landscape, meant to guide not the physical body, but the spirit. From this perspective, the treasure is not material at all, but represents enlightenment, a sacred secret intended exclusively for those capable of deciphering the signs. And yet, treasure hunters continue their persistent excavations, seeking gold where perhaps none exists. The Rosicrucians would probably scoff at this irony, for their greatest lesson was that true riches are hidden not in the earth, but in the depths of the human soul. Nevertheless, the parallels remain undeniable. Secrecy, symbols, geometry. Every new layer of Oak Island's riddles only deepens the suspicion that the island was not a random refuge, but a deliberately created sanctuary. Its guardianship was passed through orders of silence and shadow. Whether Templars, Rosicrucians, or both orders together, their legacy is preserved, and Oak Island, silent beneath its ancient trees and tidal waters, may still be the keeper of their greatest secret. Throughout human history, whenever rumors of forbidden truths arose, the powerful quickly rose to silence them. The Templars were accused of heresy not only because of their immense wealth, but also because of the knowledge they might have possessed. The Rosicrucians were rejected as fabrications, their manifestos forbidden and burned. Even the Masons, centuries later, became objects of persecution by the church and crown. The same pattern always repeats. Knowledge threatening existing power must be reliably buried. If Oak Island truly conceals valuable relics or ancient records, it is no wonder that such a vault would be hidden far beyond the reach of kings and popes. Imagine parchments, sealed in oiled leather, recounting a genealogy that the church could never accept, or texts directly contradicting sacred scripture. Imagine relics, the Grail, the Ark of the Covenant, or bones that, it is claimed, contain holy blood, whose very existence could shatter centuries of dogma and beliefs. Imagine if such revelations had leaked into medieval Europe. They would undoubtedly have split Christendom into countless fragments. The fragile construct of the papacy, already barely holding on, could have collapsed under the unbearable weight of a truth that could not be denied. Monarchies, whose thrones rested on the doctrine of divine right, would inevitably have shaken to their very foundations if their fundamental principles proved to be mere clever lies. Consequently, those who possessed this knowledge faced only one choice: to keep it secret, and this act of concealment was dictated not by greed, but by an acute, vital necessity. However, suppression is not equivalent to complete destruction. It merely drives an inconvenient truth into the dark depths of shadow, where it continues to exist, like an invisible ghost, waiting for its hour. In this context, Oak Island, with all its layered secrets and ingenious tricks, may well represent the quintessence of such suppression. It is not a simple vault, created for the enrichment of its builders, but rather a monumental structure designed to forever silence some grand revelation. One should carefully consider how the island itself tirelessly resists any attempts at intrusion. Every ingenious trap, every sudden collapse, every tragic accident, all of this is perceived not as a simple series of coincidences, but as part of a carefully thought-out design. As if the secret buried here must remain in impenetrable shadow until humanity is ready to accept it, or perhaps until it is never ready for it. History testifies that the suppression of knowledge always demanded an exorbitant price. For example, the Knights Templar paid for their secrets with their lives. The Rosicrucians dissolved into obscurity, their teachings hidden from prying eyes. The Masons, for centuries, had to endure suspicion and persecution. Each of these orders held echoes of something grand, something strictly forbidden, and it is quite likely that all of them, each in their own way, were guardians of the same ancient legacy, vigilantly guarding the silence around Oak Island's mystery. It is quite appropriate to ask, what would happen if such knowledge were indeed made public? Would it enlighten humanity, or on the contrary, plunge it into destruction? Would it bring long-awaited unity or unbridled chaos? Probably those who erected this mysterious vault grappled with these very same unsettling questions. Perhaps that is why they made the decision in favor of concealment, rather than revelation, preferring deep silence to loud proclamation. Thus, Oak Island appears before us simultaneously as a powerful symbol and a stern warning, tirelessly reminding us that some truths possess such colossal power that they must be kept secret. And this is not because they are false, but because uttering them can be immeasurably dangerous. If one assumes that Oak Island is truly a refuge for a relic of unimaginable power, then it inevitably follows that it never remained without reliable protection. Through the centuries, spanning boundless oceans, guardians likely existed, individuals whose devotion was sealed not by the pursuit of fame or recognition, but by an unbreakable oath of silence. Some traditions tell of Templars who did not perish in the flames of inquisitorial persecution, but managed to escape into the deep shadows, carrying with them the heavy burden of sacred guardianship. They transformed into silent wanderers, shedding their characteristic white cloaks and carefully hiding the crosses that once adorned their chests. Nevertheless, even under the strictest secrecy, their sacred oaths remained inviolable and unchanged. Their true duty was not to earthly kings or Roman popes, but to the relic they guarded and the grand truth it embodied. Perhaps they themselves arrived on Oak Island, personally erecting the complex vault, imprinting their mysterious symbols in stone, and skillfully weaving deadly traps into the earth's depths and the rhythm of the tides. Or perhaps they entrusted this monumental task to loyal allies, skilled mariners, initiated masons, or enigmatic mystics, leaving behind only an encrypted map of symbols, readable only by their brothers in the order. Throughout the subsequent centuries, the incessant whispers of tradition claimed that the guardians did not vanish without a trace. Local farmers spoke of mysterious strangers who appeared on the island, glimpsed for a moment among the thick trees, and then vanished without a trace. Early explorers, those who dared to begin excavations, spoke of a constant feeling of being watched, as if invisible eyes relentlessly followed their every movement. Were these tales merely products of imagination, or were they echoes of the presence of a continuous line of protectors, vigilantly ensuring that the great mystery remained untouched? The very idea of continuous guardianship is not unprecedented. On the contrary, many sacred relics throughout human history have been guarded not in impregnable fortresses, but in deep silence, protected by secret lines of initiates who swore to keep the secret, passed down from generation to generation, from father to son, from master to apprentice. The guardians of Oak Island, if such truly exist, likely operate on a similar principle. Perhaps they still invisibly dwell among us to this day, their legacy unspoken and their mission unchanged. For silence itself can prove to be the greatest protection. To utter a word would be to commit betrayal. To reveal the secret would be to devalue centuries of selfless sacrifices. This is why the guardians continue to remain in the shadows, unseen. Their presence is felt only in how the island itself stubbornly refuses to yield, as if invisible hands still guard its innermost heart. If this assumption is true, then Oak Island is by no means abandoned. It is not forgotten. It is under constant guard, preserved and protected, not by locks or fortress walls, but by the silence of those who keep the memory. And so we must ask ourselves a profound question. When modern treasure seekers embark on their excavations, are they challenging only the forces of earth and water? Or are they challenging an ancient brotherhood that has existed unnoticed for 7 centuries? A brotherhood of guardians who still silently walk the earth, ensuring that the great mystery of Oak Island remains exactly where it was destined to rest. As centuries inexorably passed and technology steadily advanced, the mystery of Oak Island not only didn't fade, but on the contrary, grew even stronger and more alluring. By the early 19th century, organized syndicates were formed, aiming to conduct larger and deeper excavations of the famous money pit. They employed the most advanced means of the time, powerful steam pumps, sturdy drills, and later even explosives like dynamite. However, every new effort seemed to invariably encounter the same insurmountable barrier. Floods, sudden collapses, and inevitable disappointments accompanied every attempt, as if the island, with a sarcastic smirk, mocked human ambitions. As drilling operations progressed, very unusual artifacts were extracted from the depths of the earth. Fragments of metalwork, links of ancient chains, and most intriguingly, tiny scraps of parchment on which traces of ancient ink were barely discernible. These finds were not like typical pirate treasures. Rather, they served as subtle hints of something carefully hidden, something recorded, documented, and meticulously preserved over centuries. The parchment fragments, in particular, suggested the existence of an extensive library or archive, rather than a banal gold hoard. These records, perhaps, contained information about ancient bloodlines or described relics of such significant power or danger that hiding them outside the European continent was deemed necessary. With the dawn of the 20th century, advanced technological solutions were introduced into the arsenal of researchers. Workers operating excavators now actively employed sonar systems, conducted comprehensive geophysical surveys, and even lowered miniature cameras into deep boreholes for visual inspection. The images obtained through these means were deeply disturbing and raised many questions. The pictures showed outlines resembling sturdy wooden beams, extensive voids that could be interpreted as underground chambers, and even objects that some eyewitnesses confidently recognized as the outlines of ancient chests. Nevertheless, this fleeting glimpse of the underground world brought no final clarity. Every clue remained fragmented, as if the island deliberately revealed just enough to maintain unflagging interest and prompt seekers to return again and again to its mysteries. At Smith's Cove, evidence of engineering artistry significantly surpassing all preliminary expectations also came to light. Here, complex systems of stone drains were found, which, like outstretched human fingers, skillfully guided flows of seawater into specially created flood tunnels. The construction of such a hydraulic structure required not only outstanding technical skills, but also a purposeful, well-thought-out intention, serving as convincing proof of the exceptionality of its creators. Their primary goal was to ensure the impregnability of their vault, achieved not through brute force or fortifications, but through ingenious and treacherous engineering design. However, despite all efforts, an ominous curse continued to hang over the island. The number of human casualties steadily grew. Wealthy financiers who had invested fortunes in the search were ruined, losing everything. Entire families disintegrated, unable to withstand the weight of the all-consuming obsession that afflicted their members. Each new expedition, it seemed, exacted a price from the seekers not only in vast sums of money, but also in human lives. The legend of 7 deaths preceding the revelation of the mystery continued to be passed down, and its ominous count inexorably approached its fatal completion. Even in the 21st century, the island stubbornly resists intrusion. Mighty excavators, equipped with modern drilling rigs and heavy machinery, encounter the same insurmountable obstacles and failures as their predecessors decades ago. Underground tunnels suddenly collapse, shafts instantly fill with water, and unexplained anomalies regularly appear on scanning images, leading to nothing but fleeting shadows and new riddles. And yet, despite all the tragedies and disappointments, the alluring charm of the island remains unchanged. Every unsuccessful excavation attempt is countered by the finding of another parchment fragment. Every collapse is followed by a glimpse of ancient metal. After every ruin, a mysterious lead cross is extracted from the earth. Each such artifact rekindles hope and the promise in the hearts of seekers that something truly extraordinary is hidden deep underground. The island does not capitulate to human onslaught. It merely hints subtly, barely whispers its secrets, and inexorably lures generation after generation into its complex, intricate labyrinth. Modern excavations represent merely the newest chapter in this centuries-old, epic story. A story that, quite possibly, will not find its completion until the island itself decides to release what it so zealously guards. With each new, unsuccessful excavation attempt, with each artifact extracted from the viscous mud and salty seawater, the mystery of Oak Island only becomes deeper and more intricate. And as this enigma deepens, numerous theories begin to multiply, like branches on an ancient tree, each striving to reach the very heart of the island's hidden secret. Some researchers firmly adhere to the hypothesis of the island's connection to the Knights Templar. For them, the unusual geometry of the structures, the cross resembling an ancient relic, and the parchment fragments, all convincingly point to a medieval origin of the mysteries. These proponents see Oak Island as nothing less than a sacred refuge for loyal knights, a carefully hidden vault whose purpose was to protect the priceless relics of Christendom from the encroachments of both the Pope and secular kings. Other researchers, however, hold the view that the roots of this mystery go much deeper, predating the Templar era entirely. They hypothesize about ancient mariners, perhaps Phoenicians who, it is suggested, crossed the Atlantic Ocean long before Columbus's voyages, leaving behind engineering structures strikingly ahead of their time. From this perspective, Oak Island appears not as a medieval vault, but as a significantly older refuge, whose treasure is inextricably linked to long-forgotten empires and irrevocably lost civilizations. There are also those who lean towards a more prosaic, earthly explanation for the origin of the mystery. They suggest that the mysterious shaft was constructed by Spanish sailors hiding looted gold, or by British military engineers concealing important military chests. However, the astonishing complexity of the tunnel system and the grand scale of the flooding engineering system make such explanations completely insignificant and implausible against the colossal weight and depth of the overall mystery. Some researchers, delving into the world of ancient legends, see Oak Island not as an ordinary vault of precious gold, but rather as a grand stone library, a place where unique manuscripts of forbidden gospels, comprehensive genealogical trees, or even detailed maps of other sacred but lost places were reliably sealed. In this light, the island's treasure appears not as material wealth, but as priceless knowledge, patiently awaiting its hour when it can radically rewrite all known human history. Some go even further in their assumptions, reaching the heights of mystical hypotheses. They barely whisper about the legendary Ark of the Covenant, its golden chest supposedly resting in the Nova Scotia earth, where its unimaginable power slumbers beneath thick layers of oak and clay. Others interpret the Grail not as a sacred cup, but as an ancient bloodline, a truth carefully encoded in ancient parchment and preserved in the strictest secrecy for centuries. It is noteworthy that each of these numerous theories is, in essence, a reflection of the aspirations and hopes of the era in which it originated. Gold attracted pirates, mysterious relics lured mystics, and priceless knowledge, tireless seekers of truth. Thus, Oak Island transforms into a kind of mirror, reflecting the innermost hopes and deepest fears of all who dare to approach its shores. And perhaps this is why the island's mystery persists for so long, for it offers not a single, final answer, but 1,000 possible solutions, each seeming as convincing and plausible as the previous one. However, in the end, the island itself remains majestically silent. It confirms none of the hypotheses put forward and refutes none of them. It merely patiently observes, century after century, as people project their most daring dreams and innermost hopes onto its ancient soil. Theories continue to multiply, creating new and intricate labyrinths of assumptions. But the truth, the authentic solution, remains reliably buried, patiently awaiting its hour in the deep shadows, unreachable by man. If Oak Island truly hides something valuable, then perhaps this treasure is not meant for the eyes of the modern world. For among the numerous rumors, it is most often not heaps of gold or sparkling jewels that are mentioned, but objects endowed with truly sacred power. These are relics capable of shaking the foundations of faith, overthrowing entire kingdoms, and completely rewriting the course of human history. Among such artifacts, the Ark of the Covenant holds a special place, which, according to tradition, contains the tablets of the law. It is described as a receptacle of divine presence and simultaneously as a weapon of terrifying power. If, as ancient legend claims, the Knights Templar discovered it beneath the Temple Mount, then they would undoubtedly have been obligated to guard it at the cost of their own lives. In such a case, the question arises, could Oak Island have become the last refuge of this ark, securely sealed in an underground chamber, protected from the outside world by the might of the sea and stone? Next on the list of mysterious artifacts is the Holy Grail, which is often depicted as a cup, but in other traditions is described as a vessel containing blood. Some researchers even claim that the Grail is not a material object, but rather a bloodline, a living legacy of Christ himself. If records or relics confirming this profound truth were ever hidden, then Oak Island would represent an ideal refuge, inaccessible to the influence of Rome and beyond the claims of kings. Other researchers whisper of sacred manuscripts, lost gospels, apocryphal texts, and genealogical records deliberately erased from official scripture. The parchment fragments discovered in the shafts only fuel these intriguing assumptions. Could they have been mere scraps of a larger archive, written testimony of truths that proved too dangerous for medieval Europe and its established orders? There are also those who suggest the presence of bones, perhaps the remains of revered, or conversely, despised historical figures, relics of saints, or even more incredibly, the remains of a much more significant person. Such discoveries would not bring wealth, but would cause colossal destabilization. Possessing them would mean acquiring power capable of completely reformatting the very structure of faith and worldview. Perhaps it is for this deep reason that the mysterious vault remains sealed. These relics are forbidden not because they are false, but because their truth is too heavy and destructive for human consciousness. The Church could not allow them to come to light. Perhaps the world itself is not ready for such a revelation even now. And so Oak Island keeps them in absolute silence. Its ingenious traps, its mysterious curse, its age-old silence, all serve as protection not only from ordinary plunderers, but from revelation itself. To dig here is not just to seek treasure. It means risking the disclosure of truths that were buried for centuries. These forbidden relics continue to remain in the shadows, their whispers carried by the wind and water, reaching only selected ears. And whether it is the Ark, the Grail, lost Gospels, or something even stranger and more incomprehensible, one thing remains certain. If they ever come to light, the world as we know it will never be the same. As centuries inexorably passed, Oak Island retained its unchanging essence. Trees swayed in the wind, tides rose and fell, storms fiercely raged on its shores. However, deep beneath the soil and stone, its secret remained untouched. Digging shafts and modern drills pierced its surface, but never reached its heart. The island continues to remain silent, a riddle that stubbornly refuses resolution. Perhaps this is its true nature. It is not a treasure to be seized, but rather a mystery to be contemplated. The money pit, the swamp, the unusual geometry of the stones, the scattered artifacts, all these are mere fragments, but never the full picture. Each new hint lures seekers forward, only for the earth to close again, as if reminding them that some truths are not easily given, but pursued throughout life. Thus, Oak Island has transformed into something far greater than just a geographical location. It has become a mirror of human aspirations. People seek here not only gold or ancient relics, but meaning itself, proof that history still holds many secrets, that our age of knowledge has not yet conquered everything. The island whispers that the past is never entirely lost, that beneath every layer of soil lies another story, waiting to be told. This is why the legends of the Templars continue to linger. Perhaps the exiled knights indeed transported their relics across the sea, sealing them in a vault created from oak and clay. Perhaps the Rosicrucians or Masons continued their work of guardianship, adding new layers of symbols and secrecy. Or perhaps the island's mystery is even older, linked to civilizations whose names we no longer pronounce. Each of these possibilities seems convincing. None can be proven, but perhaps this is the whole point. Oak Island exists not because it was solved, but because it remained unsolved. Its silence is its strength. Its resistance is the reason why it still captivates the imagination. Closing your eyes tonight, imagine this island under the shimmering stars. Its swamp reflects the moonlight, and the pines whisper something in the wind. Beneath this deceptively calm surface, a secret remains untouched for centuries, waiting in the darkness. Whether it's a treasure, a relic, or a grand revelation, we may never know. And yet, this mystery lures us forward through generations, across oceans, through our dreams. Oak Island calls with the promise that history still hides wonders. Perhaps one day the vault will open, or perhaps it should remain closed forever, becoming a mystery without end. Until then, the whispers continue to sound, and Oak Island sleeps, guarding its secret under the vigilant tide.